Time is precious, and so are our pets. So time with our pets is extra precious. That's why we started Dutch. Dutch provides 24/7 access to licensed vets, with unlimited virtual visits and follow-ups for up to 5 pets. You can message a vet at any time and schedule a video visit the same day. Our vets can even prescribe medication for many ailments, and shipping is always free. With Dutch, you'll get more time with your pets and year-round peace of mind when it comes to their vet care.
Revenge quitting and other youth-driven recipes for American failure. How to return to a nation of success. That's the topic of today's Bold and Blunt. And I'm your host, Cheryl Chumley, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. Have you heard of this trend, this fairly new trend being driven by Gen Z, by those up to age 28 right now in America, called revenge quitting? Revenge quitting. It's when people get too ticked off at their bosses because they don't think their bosses are treating them right. And so instead of just calmly quitting, instead of giving their 2 weeks notice and exiting stage left in a adult manner, in a mature manner, they just up and quit and try and choose a time to quit where and when it will cause the most chaos. So if they work in retail, they choose to quit abruptly without giving any notice at, say, Christmas time or Black Friday. So this is a trend that has been driven, according to data, by Gen Zs who think that employers are supposed to provide them that ever elusive work-life balance. And they see work as just a part of their life where it's not the most important part, where it's supposed to be harmonious with the other activities that they do in life. And that if it isn't harmonious, if it isn't peaceful, if it isn't working toward some social justice good, then they blame the employer. And they think that it's incumbent on them, that it's their moral responsibility and right to get back at their employer and just up and quit. Revenge quitting. That can't be good when you're starting out in the workforce to leave behind a trail of chaos. So when you go to the next potential employer, when you go for that next job interview and they ask you, well, what is this gap in your resume of the last 2 years? What have you been doing? Oh, I've been revenge quitting. I've been revenge quitting and forcing my employers to do the social justice agendas that I want to see achieved in America. And then the potential employer looks at them and says, yeah, well, how's that been going for you? So before I get into more of that, I want to quickly mention, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at Real Life Network, at washingtontimes.com, where you may also subscribe to my 3 times a week newsletter, Bold and Blunt with Cheryl Chumley. Just go to washingtontimes.com, find the newsletter section, click on it, and enter your email address, and you'll be signed up to receive my newsletter. It comes out Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Contains my commentaries, my Bold and Blunt podcasts, and whatever video versions of Bold and Blunt I do during the week. But you can also get Bold and Blunt wherever podcasts are available. So revenge quitting is a thing in the news. If you haven't read any stories about it, it's out there. For instance, Newsweek did this piece just in March 17th. What is revenge quitting? Gen Z driving new career trend. Let me just read a little bit from it. As bitterness increases with the workforce, employees are moving to leave jobs, which is nothing new. But what is new is how they're doing it. People aren't just quitting their jobs and leaving calmly. Instead, they're slamming the door on their way out. Enter the revenge quitter. Revenge quitting is when employees who feel undervalued or frustrated leave their jobs in a way that is abrupt and designed to cause as much chaos and dismay as possible. As with many new employment trends, Newsweek goes on to say, it is largely being driven by Gen Z as the younger generation's entry into the workforce has sparked major shifts in the discourse around approaches to work. Gen Z is made up of those between the ages of 13 and 28 and is expected to make up 30% of the workforce by 2030, which is why revenge quitting is something to pay attention to, right? Because this is going to be 30% of America's workforce in the coming few years. This is the type of mentality that you as a consumer are going to be encountering when you go to stores to shop. You're going to be served, you're going to be checked out by a Gen Zer who thinks that their employer exists in order to achieve, in their minds, what is defined as a greater good for society. They think that going to work is not just a paycheck, it's not a way to earn money, to achieve a personal financial goal, a personal economic end, a stepping stone to something greater, a character builder, right? They don't see work that way. They see work as something that the employer is supposed to provide them that serves a harmonious agenda in their own life, that advances some sort of social good that they deem crucial in America. So what is driving Gen Z's revenge quitting trend? Newsweek writes a whole bunch of paragraphs about it, but let me tell you basically what it is. It's spoiled little brats. I mean, how else to describe it? You can paint it any way you want. You can put any kind of shiny light on it you want. You can put a little rosy type of coating on it. But what it comes down to is little bratty kids, little bratty entitled kids growing up into older bratty entitled adults. And they think that work is supposed to be defined in their own lives to their own will. They think employers are supposed to bend to their own wills instead of the other way around. Instead of going into the workforce, understanding that it's a gift, it's a blessing that they've been given this job and treating it accordingly. So how might this impact employers? Newsweek asks. Well, employers are left in the lurch many times, right? And also, employers may be hesitant to hire Gen Zers because maybe they're aware of this sort of trend and they don't want to have to deal with the brattiness. And especially, they don't want to have to deal with the brattiness when they can't call it out as brattiness. You know, you call a Gen Zer brat or entitled or spoiled, and next thing, you get the condemnation of the whole Gen Zer social trolling organization out for you, calling you discriminatory, calling you intolerant, calling you this and that. So many employers don't want to deal with that, right? Revenge quitting at its core, Newsweek writes, quoting, let's see, who are they quoting in here? Quoting some person with an unpronounceable last name that conducted some research on it. So we'll just leave it at that. Revenge quitting is at its core a form of protest. It's an emphatic, I'm not going to take this moment. For the Gen Zer, it's not just about leaving a job, but about making a statement, calling for better treatment, and insisting on a healthier, more values-driven work environment. And this is what this unpronounceable last name data expert says about what can be learned from this trend. This is the quote. Let's see severe actions like revenge quitting as a cry for change. Gen Z wants those of us who have come before them to do better and benefit from change alongside them. Well, here's my response to that. If Gen Z doesn't like the workforce and wants it to change, Gen Z can start their own beepin' businesses and work hard and bring their businesses to a level of success, just as the employers that they want to revenge quit on have done. It's a free market still in America. If you don't like who you're working for, you are free to apply to different jobs and get different jobs if you're able. And if after job after job after job, you're still dissatisfied with the current state of employers in America, then you are certainly free to start your own business. So to me, that's the answer. And will the lazy, entitled, spoiled brats out there in Gen Z's workforce take that advice? I don't know. Maybe. Revenge quitting. Revenge quitting, the facts. Now I am at v7recruitment.com. A recent study conducted by Software Finder found that 4% of full-time employees are planning on revenge quitting this year, meaning 2025, and 7% of hybrid workers will do the same. Although this is a small percentage, the study also found that a total of 93% of full-time employees are frustrated in their current job, with the reasons being: A, 48% cite low salary and lack of pay raises, 34% cite feeling undervalued, and 33% see no growth opportunities. Well, all right, newsflash. So I've been in the workforce for decades now, and I can say that these are all things that previous generations have had to deal with as well. This is nothing new. It's not like all of a sudden Gen Z graduates college and moves into the workforce, and all of a sudden in America, all the workers, all the employers in America suddenly brought about a system of low pay with no pay raises, and they got together at the corporate business secret meetings they hold in America, apparently, and they decided to undervalue their employees. And they also, as a little bit of bonus, they decided to offer zero growth opportunities to all their employees. It's not like a secret club of corporate entities out there and CEOs gather together and decide these things, right? And they decided to pinpoint Gen Z. They rubbed their hands together in glee and they said, hey, you know what? Let's go get that Gen Z crowd. Let's go get that age 13 through 28 crowd and make them feel very undervalued. This is something that's every worker since the beginning of America, since the beginning of work, right, has felt undervalued, has been in positions where they saw no growth opportunity, has been, in their minds, underpaid, either perceived or real, and they've been dissatisfied with their jobs. Well, guess what? It's called free market. Leave. Go find another job, or, as I said, start your own. That way you can be your own boss. And so if you have somebody to cry against, you can take responsibility because it'll be yourself. I have a guest today. Who has penned a book that talks a little bit about this revenge quitting, but also about the general demise of youthful pursuits of success in America, leading to a state in America where it's going to, as we see, right, 30% of Gen Zs are going to make up the workforce in just the next couple of years, that is going to harm all of America. If you have a workforce filled with people who are lazy, spoiled, entitled, then that doesn't exactly say economic prosperity for a nation, right? Tom Lewis is his name. He's a longtime successful businessman with a book that just came out suggesting, hey, youth, wake up and smell the opportunity. It's not all about you. And America still is this great country of opportunity if only you'll open your eyes and look. That's not his title. That's a paraphrase. Anyhow, Tom Lewis, I want to thank you so much for being on Bold and Blonde. It is so great to have you here.
Well, it's always great to be bold and blunt.
Well, I look forward to our discussion. I was looking over the materials your PR people sent about your book, Solid Ground 10 Proven Principles for Success. And what struck me is that you are a successful businessman, but you have many ideas how youth can become successful in the workforce. What's going on with youth today?
Yeah, well, I think youth are really in a crisis. I call them young adults, maybe high school through 30 years old. But we've raised three sons. They're all good. They're all solid young men. And I think they were born early enough to kind of escape some of the nonsense. But in about 2010, my wife and I were interviewing high school kids for scholarships, and we could see a change. And instead of saying, I want to be successful, they would say, well, I kind of want to be successful, but I don't want to give up my happiness to be successful. and so they and then so many of them would say, I'd say, well, what are you going to do when you grow up? And they would say, well, I just want to find my passion and do what I love and live my dream.
Wow.
And I thought, where are these kids getting that? I mean, they're all saying the exact same thing. So yes, this book, Solid Ground, that has just come out in a paperback, really talks about how we've always been able to build a good life. And a lot of this is biblical. I mean, I didn't really write it as a biblical book, but many people have commented on that the principles in this book are historically accurate in terms of, character, hard work, setting goals. I mean, that's the way you earn a good life and you build a good life. I've been a home builder and a real estate developer my whole life, and when you build a house with a bad foundation, you have a lot of problems. And a life is the same way. So I talk about building your foundation and how the foundation really starts with your character and your work ethic.
It's funny, not funny, but I guess it's a sad commentary that the idea of hard work has been really put in the column of a negative, right? But if you want to be successful in life, it's the hard work that gives you the payoff. It's the hard work that makes it worthwhile.
I love to tell this little story. As I wrote this book, when you write a book, you learn a lot about something because you have to say it, correctly and thoughtfully. And it occurred to me that when you try something hard, and that's what I mean by hard work, what usually happens is you fail. And then you struggle, and then you get knocked down, and then you get back up, and you try that again and again. And if you don't give up, you succeed. And during that process, there's two really good things happen. Your self-esteem goes up because you're proud of yourself, and your resilience improves. And if you talk to many people, they say what this younger generation really lacks is self-esteem and resilience. And the solution to both of those problems is hard work. And so, I've always loved to work, and not everybody does. But to me, work is fun. It's just something interesting to do, but I wish more people were like that. They'd be happier if they weren't.
To what degree, right? And happiness should be a byproduct of self-esteem and hard work, not the ultimate end game. As I'm sure you'll agree, but I wanted to ask you this really quickly first. To what degree do you see the public school system as really degrading the idea of self-esteem? I'm sure you remember, trophies, just participation trophies and all that.
Yeah.
To me, that seems sort of a start of that movement.
Well, I think, briefly, I think public education is a disaster right now. And it's happened in the last 15 years. It probably started before that, but when our children graduated from high school around 2000, I think they were pretty good. I think they weren't that different than when I graduated in the 60s. I mean, they were just kind of what I call normal. And I'd say good, pretty good. They had the dance classes for advanced students. And I think they were pretty good. But The colleges of education have been teaching a real kind of leftist philosophy for over 20 years, and it's starting to creep into our schools. And I think it showed its head in 2010. But I've also spent a lot of time with public universities, and been a large donor to 3 of them, and they're even worse, I think. And just in terms of, I read an article the other day that universities are now treating their students like customers. And, the dorm rooms are like fancy hotels, and the meal plans are lavish, and everybody gets an A. You give your customer an A because you don't want your customer to quit. And then the tuition goes up, 8% every year. And now it's, $50,000 to send your kid anywhere to college. So who can afford that? And then the worst part is they really don't teach them anything, because the teachers want to do research, not teach. So it's a big mess.
And you talk about this phenomena that we're seeing across America, the anxious generation. I've noticed that you could also call it the pill popping generation, right? Where there's a pill that makes you feel better about everything. Where do you see this leading in terms of America's future?
It's sad, really. It's disturbing. But I think the good news is the word is out there. I think when Jonathan Haidt's book came out on the anxious generation, that was very powerful. I also read a book recently that I would recommend to people called Hollowed Out, by a high school teacher in Northern California named Jeremy Adams, that talks about exactly what has happened in his high school in the last 20 years, and it's really, really bad. Kids aren't learning. The bad kids can act out, and there's no discipline, and nobody's learning, and test scores are going down. So I think the good news, though, is the secret is out. It's been kind of hidden. I think parents are aware of it, and the Department of Education is aware of it, and there's going to be a lot of changes coming in public education, and it needs to happen because I think first of all they've got to become patriotic. They've got to teach young adults to love their countries, not the opposite of that.
Yeah, a return to civics in the classroom is a definite necessity. And, speaking to your book, it's sort of an optimistic title, and I imagine you include many principles in it where we can learn from how to become successful in the workforce. Solid Ground, 10 Proven Principles for Success. Talk a little bit about this revenge quitting that we're seeing among youth today and how we can counter that.
Well, I think that's just an example of how spoiled they are, really, that they would have the nerve to do that and to actually feel like they can miss, that violates so many of my principles that it's just ridiculous. I mean, the first one is personal character. If you're getting a paycheck, you owe your boss some work. Number 2, it's not hard work. Number 3, you're hurting yourself. So, the solid ground principles, the 10 proven ones that I talk about in the book, I'm going to mention 5 of them, and it's really building your foundation. And a life has to be built on a solid foundation. The first one's personal character. You have to do what you say you're going to do, and you have to be moral, and you have to treat others with respect. Number 2, hard work. That's kind of the formula for success and happiness, ultimately, I think. Setting goals. You have to set goals, and set goals that are inspiring, don't have numbers, but get you excited about what you can become, not what you're going to do, but what you want to become. And then understand yourself, where your talent lies, what you're good at, what you're not good at, accept that. And finally, help other people. Because, my definition of happiness is the natural result of loving other people being grateful and living a moral life. And so, revenge quitting is not doing any of those things. It's not being grateful. It's not helping other people, and it's not moral. And so, to do that is to make yourself very unhappy.
So tell your story a little bit, Tom, because you have a long career, a very successful career, but I'm sure along the way you've had many failures because that's what breeds success. Talk a little bit about your background and maybe one or two of the failures that you overcame to become so
Yeah.
successful.
Well, I have to start with my mother and my father. And my father was a Navy career officer. Fought in World War II in the Pacific. Back then, they didn't have any medication for anything, so just about everybody drank a lot, and he became an alcoholic, and it really disrupted our family a lot. And fortunately for me, I had a wonderful mother, and she and I were very close, and so she kind of kept me encouraged. But my father motivated me in a different way. And when I was 16 years old, we had to fight. He had started a business that went broke, and we had to sell our house and move. And I remember that day that I told myself that would never happen to me. And so I was just built that way, though. I was a hard worker. I was a good student. I played sports. I was just active. Had a lot of friends, but really had a great high school. But that was a big motivator for me, just the failure of my own father. And I didn't want to become that kind of guy. And so I went to I worked for 6 different companies in about 8 different states, and had 6 or 7 different really good bosses to learn from with good companies. And I was open to experience. I mean, that's a principle that I talk about in the book. I was willing to move. I was willing to jump on an opportunity. I moved to Arizona. I moved to Akron, Ohio. I moved to Dayton. Who would move to Dayton, Ohio? And I learned a lot. So I think that's kind of my story. But then after I kind of achieved a lot of success, I started asking myself, what did I do different? What really are the things that I did that most of my friends did not do that explains the success that I've had? And those are the 10 principles that are in this book. And so, a couple other things I would mention is making good decisions. There's a quote in there that it says, it's more important to make good decisions than just to be smart. You can be smart and make bad decisions, but decisions there's a formula for making a decision, but you first have to know your values. And if you don't know your values, then you're lost. And the other thing I talk about in terms of being successful, that very few success books even mention, is risk taking. And no risk it, no biscuit. You have to, if you want to achieve something, you have to step out on the thin ice and take some chances. But there's ways you can measure that, and there's ways you can protect yourself against that. So those are a few more of the principles that I've included in the book.
It's a very exciting book listening to you talk about it. It kind of gets my heart pumping a little bit because it just sounds so very American, right? It's just saying,
it is.
I'm just curious, how would it work with youth who have been conditioned to believe that because they exist, the world owes them and they shouldn't have to work hard? Do you think there will come a time where they want a wake-up call like your book and they'll learn from it? Or do you think it's too late for many youth in America?
I think a lot of them are going to wake up when they face the real world, and when their parents kick them out of the basement, and they got to be out there on their own. And I think this cell phone, though, is a disaster. I mean, everywhere you go, everybody has just got both hands and both eyes on their phone, and it just, it distracts human relations, which to me is kind of a huge part of life, and a good life is face-to-face conversation, people, relationships. I mean, but the cell phone is bad for all that, and that. But I think, when alcoholics, when they hit rock bottom, that's when they start getting better, and I think some of these kids will never get it, but I think hopefully a lot of them will. And but they've got to look outside themselves. That's the hard part, is thinking. And I also think that, in the introduction to Solid Ground, I included some of the negative trends that are happening, and we mentioned some of them, like the cell phones and the revenge quitting. But there's also a decline in religion and faith, and COVID really kind of knocked that down even more. Just people not going to church. But my mother used to tell me, if you want to feel good, lose 5 pounds and go to church. That was, and who wouldn't feel good if they did that, So I think faith is I had cancer 8 years ago, and it got to my liver. I had melanoma, and it spread to my liver, and I didn't know if I was going to live or not. And I'd always been a Christian and raised that way, but it had not been that close to it of late. And that really brought me a lot closer. And so I'm much stronger in my faith now than I was before that. But it's a joy. It really is a joy, but it's to know that you've got a Father in heaven that is looking out for you and is talking to you is a wonderful thing to include in your life. And so I recommend that to everyone.
Well, you've overcome much. I guess you're a success in more ways than one, and I agree wholeheartedly. Faith is probably the most important component here, which again leads down a different path in America, turning too secular, right? So but I like your show of optimism that it's when an addict hits rock bottom that they bounce back. And I guess when kids get thrown out of their homes, right, they have to face reality and pay their own bills. So Tom Lewis, it's great chatting with you. This is going to be an excellent read. I know it. Solid Ground, 10 Proven Principles for Success. I assume people can get it on Amazon, wherever books are available, yes?
Yes, for sure.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being such a great, bold, and blunt guest. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Hope to talk again. Bye-bye.
And that's another Bold and Blunt. I want to thank you for listening and remind you, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at Real Life Network, at WashingtonTimes.com, and of course, wherever podcasts are available. Tune in next time. And meanwhile, don't forget, stay smart.